special guest, Dr. Michelle Berry. She is a socio-cultural medical anthropologist and always has been a deep passion for bridging health, ancient wisdom, and new technologies. And Dr. Michelle specializes in the quantum bioresonance and biophotonics to help people, animals, and plants balance the patterns in the energy field to optimize healing. So this is really brilliant, with your background, how you are helping now, because the quantum physics, quantum science, this become very, very forefront of way to approach the health and healing. Mm-hmm. And especially when we talk about energy, we wanted to talk about this today. There's emotion. We have been talking about different episodes about how we can release this trapped emotion. How can I release them? So you have this term you call emotional voltage. Correct?
Correct. Yes. Emotional voltage.
Emotional voltage. So could you kind of give it, elaborate that, terms?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I think if you look at how we've thought about emotions in the past, they are often things that we have a hard time identifying. We know we feel a certain way, but sometimes we can't even name it. And it's often and usually not one emotion, it's many emotions. You pull back one layer, it's like an onion, and then there's multiple layers underneath it. So if we think about how we've always thought about emotions as a culture, especially in the United States, but it's changing.
Yes.
But if you think about how we've thought about emotions, we've kind of thought about them being more in our head, mm-hmm. and maybe something that's in our body, but we haven't thought about them in terms of an actual energetic experience. Mm-hmm. And so I was really interested as a medical anthropologist, I'm interested in thinking about where we came from and how we're going now, and how culture's moving, and how we think about our bodies, and how we think about healing and getting well and taking care of ourselves. So I started doing a journey back, and what I've discovered is that emotions can be measured. And so they can actually be measured by Hertz, Hertz, Hertz. And there are numerous studies out there that have demonstrated that different emotions carry a different Hertz. They have a different frequency.
That's amazing. Now we can identify exactly what frequency, emotion, right? And I heard about the organs, different cells have different frequency.
They do.
There's a huge link between that. So
there's a huge link between it. So just to give you a little bit of context, if you have somebody who's been suffering from, let's say, shame or guilt for a long time, and they've been carrying it and they haven't dealt with that emotion or that experience of that emotion, that Hertz cycle usually hangs quite low. It hangs down below 50. And there's a number of different emotions like anger, greed, shame, guilt, fear, all of those things are hanging out less than 50 Hertz. And most agree, who are looking at frequency medicine and what our normal and what our healthy looks like, is that we need to be hanging around 200. So that's huge gap.
Right there. You need to cross that 200.
Right. Yes. So if you're hanging in a space of being angry and you haven't cleared it, or a lot of fear, or a lot of shame, a lot of guilt, your emotional energetics, your voltage is actually revving down low. You're revving at 50 or less, somewhere probably between 25 and 50. Optimum, if you get to 200 suggests that we're doing pretty well, that we're doing pretty good. Not our best, but we're doing pretty good. There are higher order emotions that have different frequencies, and they carry a completely different energy. And so things like love, pride, joy, the things that I think everyone aspires to, but it can be a bit elusive. Those are 500, 600, 700. So that's really
high the rapid frequency, basically we call high vibe.
High vibes. Yeah, it is. Peace and love. They are high vibes. Truly, hurts measured and quantifiable. And so if you look at where we really want to optimally be, we want to be really more like 500-600. I mean, you could argue whether we can sustain that level, because that's a different level of intensity. But what if you start to look at the correlations between our emotions and disease, and the implications of us not dealing with our emotions and figuring out what to do with them. If you look at, like you said, organs, or you look at different diseases or illnesses or conditions, there are correlations. And so if you look at the idea of, let's say, getting a cold or a flu, it's everybody's had that before. That's usually hangs around 60, 70 hertz. And so your energetic pattern starts to go into that kind of a cycle. And if you do a dotted line between that and the emotions, you can actually see things like fear or anger. Those are things that also hang in that same range.
They're loving each other.
they resonate, right?
Yeah.
So you're really starting to see if you have this constant feeling, you're in an energetic habit. You're in a pattern. And so if we're in this pattern and we're constantly feeling angered or triggered, as people will say, about something, your body experiences that vibration all over again. And so it just goes back into that habit. And my theory is that the more that we hang on to those emotions, the more that the other parts of our body, our organs and the cell communications, they start to cluster around those and say, oh, we're used to hanging out at 70. And so we hang out at 70, and then we start to see disease and illnesses start to form. There's a lot of other theories about the linkages between hertz, and that it's literally an electrical current, and how we hold them in our bodies. And there are some out there, some really fantastic physicians and some great studies that have been done that show that we may even hold it in our bones, that we may hold our emotions in our bones, in our teeth in particular, because there's something called piezoelectric, which means that they're kind of conductive. Yes. And they literally, an emotion can create an electrical storm that you can hold in your tooth.
Yeah, there's a study I've done. Actually, as a matter of fact, each teeth there's a relationship in the meridian system, which is the energy pathway, right? Then there's a neural link between. I think I heard about it from the biological dentistry that there's a same neurons that created between the brain cells and the teeth cells.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So there's already a study I've done and researched it. Yeah.
It's very real, and there's some. You can Google search some of these things, but with the connections between meridians and the teeth meridians, if you start to look at the meridians as they relate to every single tooth in your mouth, you can start to track the genesis of illness. So if someone has a tooth infection, or they had a root canal in particular, you can actually track that down to physical issues. You can see if it's hanging out in their kidneys, or if it's hanging out in their gallbladder, or their breast, or their throat. You can their thyroid. You can actually start to see all those patterns. And so again, it all comes back to it's a charge. And so our emotions are seriously charged. They say they are, but they are literally charged. And so how do we manage it is the big question.
And how to get out those patterns, right? The patterns that doesn't serve you. You're going to shift the pattern into the patterns that you can expand and evolve.
Right. And so what we're trying to do is interrupt patterns, because our bodies actually know what they need to do. And we're not designed to be hurting all the time. We're not designed to be experiencing horrible emotions all the time. You can see some really fascinating studies. If you look, it's not just us as one-on-one. We're exchanging energy every single day with other people, and we often forget that, but we do, knowing it or not. We think
a physical being, but they don't know that we're energy being that are projecting electromagnetic field out to the world.
All day long, with every thought, every emotion, every expression. And when we do that, it goes beyond ourselves. And so our culture hangs on to those emotions too.
Mhm.
And there's studies done where cultures who have gone through pretty horrible things like war,
Mhm.
that the anger and the fear and the
Yes.
the
Hatred.
all
Yeah.
kinds of horrible, right? Really low
Mhm.
resonating emotions. When you start to look at how they're revving low, you can start to pattern the diseases in the country, and you can see it, but it takes a long time.
That's an incredible study, isn't
It's
it? Yeah,
it's really wild when you really start to look at the countries that have gone through war, and you look at the evidence of
Mhm.
different kinds of diseases and emotions and how they connect.
Mhm.
You can actually connect the dots, and you can do the same thing with countries that have been deemed as some of the healthiest places in the world.
Mhm.
There is a much higher propensity for joy and love and
Yeah.
pride and spirit and all kinds of things. So, it's, if you think of what we all just went through with COVID, or
Yes.
maybe are still going through,
Just the different patterns now.
we're
right?
seeing
Yes.
different patterns. And so we're holding a lot of different emotions and different
Mhm.
experiences that we haven't really sorted out, probably still, especially our kids.
Yes.
So we need to be thinking really hard about how do you layer different kinds of treatments together and different kinds of protocols together, so that whatever you are doing, if you're doing nutrition or you're seeing a counselor or you're talking to your doctor, what are we not thinking about? And I think what we're not thinking about is we're not thinking about the energetics of it.
Mhm.
So we can talk it all out and keep reliving it,
Yes.
which means we keep the habit and we keep the pattern
Mhm.
in the same position that it's gotten used to being in for a while, or we can intentionally interrupt it with higher vibrations.
Yes.
So it would be turning a lot of things on its head
Mhm.
if we said, don't spend so much time in your despair
Yes.
or in those frequencies. Don't spend so much time in the fear
Fear,
or so
yeah.
much time, because I think a lot of people think, oh, well, in order to get well, I need to go do the work. And the work means going in and having to relive it and feel it and grieve it and go through all the cycles again. I don't agree with that. I actually don't
Reinforcing
think it
Yeah.
keeps the frequency in place. And so you keep constantly reintroducing the hertz into your biofield,
Mhm.
and your brain and your body don't know the difference between each other. So they're saying, oh, there it is again. And so everything kind of starts to go into a flow, or a connection point. So my thought is, how do you increase the vibration?
Mhm.
Because it'd be one thing to say, everyone just go be joyful.
Yeah, just
Go feel
switch
love.
off, turn off the fear, enjoy. I mean, it's said than trying to actually act for it. Yeah.
Yeah, and sometimes maybe even just saying that might work for a half a second,
Mhm.
but that's where it starts.
Yes.
Because these are patterns, these are waves, and these are frequencies, and they're vibrations. So even interrupting it once, you stop normalizing what that thing is. And so the body and the energy field has to kind of take a step back from it and say, oh, what was
What's
that?
that?
So it
Yeah.
almost has to reset again.
Mhm.
So I think the more that you can break the cycle is possibly more beneficial to really eradicating the issue, to
Yeah.
getting rid of that vibration. But part of that is also, we get wound up, I think, in our emotions, and we think it's ours and we don't see it as an experience.
Mhm.
And so there's some people that have a theory on energetics of emotions that if you can remove yourself a bit and see it as an experience that you're having, and it's not yours. So in other words, instead of saying, I am sad, it's, I'm having an experience of being sad, which is a very different
Statements. Yes.
very
Mhm.
different statement and a very different perspective
Yes.
of, if I'm walking around feeling horrible and I'm feeling sad all day, I say I'm sad. And it's like, no, I'm having an experience of feeling sad. And that means that you quite literally separate from
Yes.
it, because you're taking that idea or that vibration and you're pulling it outside of yourself.
Yeah, I feel like I'm sad, or I'm angry. You're basically gonna put the statement, like a staking it, right? Yeah, instead of saying, okay, the experience means that there's a flow. There's this experience means that there's an ending part of it too.
Right.
Yeah. Instead of saying I'm, sad.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but there's no movement.
Yeah. Where do you go if it becomes your being and who you are? And so I think that's maybe part of it, is how we reframe what an emotion even is. And we have somewhere around 35,000 emotions that have been documented.
35,000.
35,000 emotions. So go figure. How are you going to shed layer after layer? I mean, it's not probably possible. But the good news is that of those 35,000, there's about 8 primary ones. And so you can go to the core, and you can do a lot of good work on focusing on 8. And those 8 have a ripple effect to all of the other 35,000, right? So I think part of it, I know, no kidding, that would be such a task.
Yeah.
But I think if you reframe it as an experience that is quite literally a frequency, it also I think it takes away some of its charge, maybe. I'm not sure. Nobody knows the answers to all these things. There's a lot of theory in here, and a lot of reading, and a lot of trying to connect the dots and make sense of new science and how we explain these things. But my theory is that if you can deconstruct it a bit, and you can get it outside of your biofield a bit, and understand that it's a pattern and it's a frequency. It's not a state of being, it's a state of vibrating. And that's different. And we are in control of vibrations. We can manipulate vibrations, and we can do it in a lot of different ways. That's what you're an absolute expert in. So there's a lot of different ways to manage it. And I do think that in the world of medicine, if we have been diagnosed with something, or we have, kind of chronic conditions, that you cannot ultimately heal from those things unless you look at the emotional components to it. So you need someone to help connect those dots.
Because what's the story, initial story, right? The fundamental story got to the patterns, the manifesting of the physical. So if you don't disrupt the original those patterns, they're creating a road path, right?
Yes, like the family constellations. And I mean, some is our own parents, and some might be their parents or their grandparents, because we're passing energy down through the cells, and certain kinds of vibrations and cell communications, all of that comes through.
Yeah, DNA is holding on to the patterns.
It holds on to the patterns. And there are some really fascinating studies about populations that have gone through trauma, like Jewish populations that have gone through trauma. And when you look at some of the emotional components of that experience, of what their ancestors had to endure, you can see now in 2-3 generations later, you're starting to see some of those illnesses also start to show up in the children. And is it genetic, or is it energetic, or energetic?
Energetic. I like that.
A new
energetic. Cool. Yeah. See, we're discovering it.
That's right. Energetic,
Energetic,
which could actually be a real thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Because they have discovered that, because all the DNA sequence, right? They already know that sequence means it's not just a matter. The sequence, they're holding the vibration, all those proteins, right? And that sequence is a different type of patterns they're holding on to it. Yeah. But how we triggering those patterns to manifesting it, that's just a different level of conversation.
It is a different level.
Environmental, the Dr. Lipton's conversation.
Right. Dr. Lipton's great with this, and Beverly Rubrick, and Candace Pert, and Carolyn McMakin. I mean, there's so many incredible energetics practitioners and doctors and researchers and scientists that we've all been dancing around this same topic and trying to get a handle on what can we measure, what can we change, how do we change it, and every emotion, because of its vibration, means that you can also draw a line between an essential oil. I know you've talked about those.
Yes.
Because those have frequencies.
Of course, the universe, the Earth, they discovered that already. Oh, they get given by the source, right?
Yeah.
All the the intelligence that gave us all the clue, because every plant holds a different frequency.
Plants are so powerful. Yes, and I do work with plants too. Plants are interesting, but if you look at that, you can connect the dot between one emotion and a hertz of an oil,
yes,
a hertz of a stone.
Oh yes,
a hertz of a meridian. I mean, you can literally start to just if you start to think about what it is, that gives you clues on how to help yourself, because you can do lots of different things, and it's not all talk therapy. In fact, for some people, talk therapy might be the basis, but they may feel like they've hit a wall, that they're just not getting over it, or not over the emotion, but not getting over a hump of feeling better and feeling some relief.
Okay, that's gonna become the pattern, right? Somebody doing it 2 years, or I have patients to 15 years going to see every single week, and she's not getting out of that, not step out of that particular patterns, stuck.
If you do something every week for 15 years,
become mundane, ego become comfortable, because if I go here, I think I'm getting better. But as a matter of fact, if you look at observing that progress, it's not really going anywhere.
Right.
Yeah.
It could actually be keeping her locked where she is, and she may not ever get out of that cycle. And but the nature around us is inclined to help us out. And so sometimes people will say, well, what do I do? I mean, I work with photons, so I work with light, and I work with bioresonance, so I work with quantum bioresonance, which is essentially, working with frequencies that are digital. There's a lot of different ways to work with frequencies, but that's how I have been doing it more recently. And so that's one way, is you could go see a practitioner, and you can work with somebody like yourself or like me that uses different techniques or different technologies, but it's all grounded in ancient wisdom.
Yes.
And
going back to the ancient
if we really go back to the beginning, we had emotions in the beginning.
Yes.
They have cavemen, and
it's no modern.
It's not a modern thought, but it really did start with compassion. With the caveman, that was how they realized that we had a thing called emotions. But if you go back to their principles of just first humans on the earth and processing emotions, they were really at a huge benefit compared to where we are, because they were barefoot and they were outside, and they were grounding and getting those, rebalancing their protons and their electrons. They were getting tons of different frequencies that were helping stabilize and rebalance. They had outlet for it, and we don't. So
we're so trapped.
We're very
building,
trapped.
Right? Yeah, wearing the shoes that has this shield, you can't ground
both
anywhere.
Of us, I know, we have boots on. I mean, so it sounds a little bit peculiar, but if you're experiencing depression, or you're experiencing any kind of emotional pain, and it feels like you're revving low, you are revving low, most likely. And so going outside and simply just pulling that surge from the earth energy can help to interrupt the cycle. It can help to interrupt the patterns and help to balance. There's other things like light. Like I said, I work with biophotons, but infrared light, which is that morning sun, first thing in the morning or last thing in the day. If you're lucky enough to have an infrared sauna, or someone that does, there's all kinds of light therapies. We've all seen them, and there's a huge surge in the market of lots of different, whether it's a mask or a laser beam, or
so many different angles you can shoot.
There's so many ways, but it also works with our emotions, and that's where I think we've also missed the gap. We're very focused on the body, and using light to do all these things, but what light's doing is it's actually helping with the communications, and it's bringing the frequencies around. So infrared light is another simple way. Just open up your windows if you can't go outside, because I know sometimes when people are feeling happy, the last thing you want to do is go anywhere. If nothing else, open up your windows as wide as you can, and get as much natural light into the house. Open up the blinds. Kind of needs to be through the screen. It can penetrate screen, but it can't penetrate glass usually.
One thing I really like about it, being told that all light bulb, incandescent light bulbs,
right,
they actually emanate infrared.
I've heard that too.
And right now, all this energy saving light bulb, which is the halogen or LCD, right?
Yeah.
They really create the blue lights, different type of
LEDs. Yeah, and that's another zapper.
Zapper, right? So there's just a little
And
tweak.
our
The phone,
first thing in the morning, last
yes.
thing at night,
Uh-huh.
right? All the computers, all of those things are just they're just working against us. They're not very helpful. So there are actually ways to do it. And then, like we were saying before too, aromatherapy
Yes.
is very powerful
Yeah,
because you're
the
working in
olfactory.
hertz.
Changing the feel, yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, and we're trying to, it's the energetic is one component,
Mhm.
but we do have to keep in mind still that there is a very physical, biological,
Yes.
chemistry thing that's happening when we go through an emotional experience with the limbic system and the hypothalamus and
Yes.
even the glial
The
cells in our
hormones real.
brains.
Yeah,
and-
hormones so real.
They are. Everything is still happening on the biology. So you still have to look at the biology with the emotions. But I think that if we don't look at the emotion under the biology, that we might not solve the biology.
Yes.
We might.
Mhm.
We might get lucky, and it might. There's instances maybe it's
Depends
not.
on how deep that those ingrained, how strong that those charges are, right?
Yeah.
It can be simple, just light emotional things that are interrupting, then just in the physical intervention, it can maybe get snapped out of it.
Yeah.
But many times the chronic disease, right? They have a history,
They do.
months and years, and who knows, right?
Well, I don't know. So one thing that I think about is I'm really familiar with breast cancer, and if you look at the population of women who have had breast cancer or loved ones that are experiencing it, if you start to dig around underneath some of the empowering statements that come out of the community, oftentimes you'll see something about worth. And about worth or self-value.
Mm-hmm.
And there, if you look at some of the energy cycles and the points between meridians, and you look at points between teeth, and you look at the emotional frequencies, things around shame or value, kind of self-worth, which is the opposite of that would be pride.
Yes.
If you start looking at the opposites of what they are, some of those things don't really get addressed. We talk about surgery, radiation, tamoxifen, all these things to cut the cancer out.
Mm-hmm.
But what we haven't really gotten into is what happened underneath it from the very beginning, and how do you keep it from coming back again?
Yes.
So that's the other part for me is how do you think through. You can get rid of it, you can cut it out, you can irradiate it, you can, do whatever, to chemo, but how do you keep something from coming back if you have had to take that route because it's gotten so far and that's the best option for you? And I think that a lot of it has to do with our emotional framing, and it's about that pattern and where did we pick that pattern up?
Yes.
Was it cultural? Was it familial? Was it an event? Was it something that wasn't even ours to begin with?
Yes. It could come from the outside too.
Right.
Yeah.
And so if you think of it, I think it's harder to think about where does something like guilt come from, or where does anger come from. I actually think it's easier to think about what's opposite of it, and then how do you find that? So what if all the women in the world who had breast cancer, one of the healing protocols was pride and worth, and how you find that again in yourself. And the more you practice that, and the more you live that, and you bring that and introduce that vibration, that thought, that experience of that emotion, what does that actually feel like to have pride? And then all of a sudden, whoop, you just interrupted a cycle and you just broke out. So it's kind of fun. I mean, it doesn't have to be work. It could be something kind of actually really pleasant and fun and interesting.
Because the brain doesn't know the difference between imagining it and then actually experiencing it.
No.
So what if you can imagine it? You feel like, have a huge pride. I love myself. The moment you have that, so you have to embody them, right? Not just thinking, that Michelle, like me, I'm proud of myself. No. Me, that.
It's here.
Here.
Yeah, you're totally right. I think it's just how we're not used to those feelings. I think we've fallen out of remembering what love feels like. Or we've fallen out of that the habit of feeling pride or feeling joy. Like, what is real joy?
Yes.
I mean, they're just words for us, and so it's hard to
experience.
say. Go, it's
Yeah.
experience. So go ride a roller coaster.
Yeah.
It might be fear, and maybe that's not all of it. But go do something that brings those things in. So oftentimes, after I work with somebody, I'll talk to them about how could you bring more joy into your world. And a lot of that's eliminating certain kinds of music. Music has massive frequencies. Massive frequencies.
Pay attention to that.
My 14-year-old and his music. But if you look at music, has massive frequency.
Yes.
Any kinds of things that we're exposed to, like you said, like lights and aromas. You can do very simple things, but music is a very powerful emotional stabilizer.
Absolutely.
And we can,
Movement,
goes with it does. It can make
does.
you move. But it also is, if you just don't have the means, the energy, physical energy, or even the mental energy to go after this and try and really understand it, at the very least, you can go into your music app or Google search, and you just type in heart chakra music, or which are the energy centers that have emotional correlations too. But if you just do something as simple as that in the background, you can passively be retraining and reintroducing a higher vibration into your field without having to almost even work on it.
So many ways. Well, thank goodness that we have a technology. You can wisely use that.
Yeah.
Right? Looking for the right frequency for us, right? And shutting off all this, putting the airplane mode at night, so you're not surrounded by the EMF or toxic EMF, right?
Yes.
And grounding.
Grounding.
So give us all the tip. Let's just talk about the three
the
good
top
tip. Yes.
Okay, my 3 favorites.
Top 3, yes.
I'll do my 3 favorites because
Sure.
there's probably 15 that I can think of off the top. My 3 favorites. My first one's music, because I think it's passive. Anybody can do it.
Yes.
It's free. Usually, you can find it anywhere, and so I think that's one of it. And I think that if you are just starting with it, classical music by the way it's been written and designed, and the instruments actually has the right hertz cycles and the right frequency and patterns to help with repairing and moving emotion and moving healing along. So that one I think is my first one. I love music the best.
Great.
Music. That's my favorite.
Yes.
My second would be I think the exposure to infrared light. I think is really important.
Yes.
It's also very simple and free. You roll down your windows when you're in your car, or open your windows wide around your house and try and get that natural light in. Better yet, if you can, get out and just walk, even if it's for 3 minutes. And the earlier in the day when the sun's coming up, and then later in the day when the sun's going down, it helps reset our circadian rhythms and all sorts of things that also help our brains, our glial cells and things repair at night, which are connected to our emotions. So from a chemistry perspective, I like infrared light a lot.
Second, infrared light.
Yeah. And then I think the third, I'm going to say is earthing, is grounding, is getting your... You don't have to go barefoot. That's one of the fallacies too. I think a lot of people think, oh, I've got to take off my shoes and I have to go stand outside and it's freezing. You don't have to go to that.
So what can I do?
You could simply stand outside and put your hand on a tree.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
You could touch a leaf as long as the plant's in the ground.
You're grounding through.
Yeah, not in a pot. It's something, but it's not exactly it. But you can hold on to a leaf of a plant in the ground. You can sit on a rock or a bench and just put your hands on the ground. It doesn't have to be earthing barefoot and going all crazy about how many minutes, but ideally even 3 seconds helps. Just go to your post office box and open up, get your mail barefoot.
Because we're energy being. The minute you touch, electricity goes through.
It's immediate.
Yes.
It's immediate, and we forget how important all of that energy is, because that's currency. And we need that to keep replenishing our ability to make new cells and our ability to heal the cells that we have. And so we're just interrupting cycles and bringing high energy into
Sure.
our field.
Yes.
That's what we're trying to do.
Wow. So many knowledge, information, Dr. Michelle. Yes.
Yeah, it's a fun topic, and
Yes.
it's just starting. I think that we are scratching the surface of a entirely new way of thinking about
Yes.
how to manage our emotions.
Yes.
And when we talk about how it works in the office,
Mhm.
emotional IQ
Yeah,
it
emotional IQ.
counts
yes,
there too.
yes.
It's not just illness and disease.
Correct.
It's performance and it's happiness most of all.
Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Dr. Michelle.
You-
Yes. Everybody, please come to quantumdecoder.com/can, C-A-N, and Dr. Michelle's top 10 recommendation as well as the full interview. You can watch and enjoy. And then Dr. Michelle's also contact information as well too. So thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
See you
Be
soon.
happy.
Be happy. Yeah.